Hello and welcome to pjnet.tv and this video segment, My Perspective and Comments. Well folks, I want to start right from the beginning here with what we've been discussing over the last 3 weeks to a month. Just kind of updating what's been going on in our nation and around the world regarding coronavirus and the health issues and preparation. And that's what we've been discussing over the last 2 to 3 weeks, is just being prepared, doing what would be necessary in case there was a quarantine situation in your region or your neighborhood or town. And we've discussed having food on hand for that would last a couple of weeks. Water supply, and at this point with this particular illness, the water supply isn't tainted, so we can use our own water in our home, right off the tap in our own home. So having plenty of water, and washing the hands, that's been a pivotal piece that the medical physicians and professionals have been telling us. 20 seconds of washing your hands, soap and water is fine. I mean, those solutions, antibiotic solutions that they have out there now to basically disinfect your hands immediately. If you want them, you can purchase them, but just soap and water, 20 seconds of washing your hands would be fine. But I want to touch on what hasn't been discussed, an update, so to speak, here at pjnet.tv. Now, one thing that sometimes gets forgotten when we're getting ready for preparing for a situation like this would be in an emergency, is our pets. Do you have enough food on hand that would you be able to take care of your pets for 2 weeks to 3 weeks, a month? Also yourself, if you take medications and you have to get a script put in, is your medications up where you could be able to hunker down in your home for 3 weeks to a month? So do you have your medications that you may need throughout that time frame? So those are definitely two areas that we did not touch on: our pets and our medications. So being able to, at this point, preparing and maybe getting to the pharmacy now to get necessary medications. Now, what's been going on here with this coronavirus? Well, one, we've seen Japan, China, and Italy right now have been in the situation where they are closing schools and actually telling portions of their community to hunker down in their own home for quarantine situation. And in the States, that's what we're seeing too. New York, just in downstate New York City area, they've already issued a self-quarantine there was a gentleman who came down coronavirus, and he was compromised because of his pre-existing condition with his respiratory system, and he was at one of the synagogues. So there were people that had come in contact with him there. So we're seeing right now in New York that they are issuing for those people that had come in contact, doing a self-quarantine situation. So it's happening. What we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks to a month is happening here in the States. Now, I want to talk a bit about, influenza, just the common strains of influenza, the flu. And just to give you a a sense of the what's been going on here in the States. You know, a lot of, because we have 24/7 news and social media, and it really seems to be ramping up, and people are getting scared. I just want you to maybe just look at these stats and get a feel that it is not the sky is falling. In fact, they're saying that 80% of people that might have this, some might not even show symptoms. Some might show it just not feeling good, or a regular common cold or flu, and that's it. It runs through, and then everything is fine. It's the 20%, the immune compromised, that is really concerning many people. Those people that may be in nursing homes that are physically compromised, and having your immune system depleted. That is the vulnerable population that we're seeing. It's vulnerable in this particular virus. But as of October 1st, 2019 to February 2022, we've had deaths of the common flu between 18 and 46,000. I say that again, 18,000 to 46,000. So that gives you, we just need to take in consideration that, the regular common flu, there are deaths that are attributed to just a common a flu. So again, some of the things that we've talked about, doing these hygiene, sanitary, washing our hands, and just being aware when you're in public. You may want to wash your hands more often than normal when you're in public. And as I mentioned about the not having a need for hand sanitizer, if you are in the public a lot, maybe having one of those containers that you can put in your pocket or your purse, a hand sanitizer, and you use those a little bit more often than you normally would. But at this point, if you're healthy, you're not immune compromised, then just continue to go about living your life. And if your community does say that, look, with this area, your region, town, community is affected, and the officials want people to hunker down for a couple weeks, then yes, go right ahead, obey the ordinances and what's going on, but be aware that what we've been talking about here over the 3 weeks to month is to be prepared. Do your due diligence now and be prepared so that you have supplies and necessary that you would be able to self-quarantine for 3 weeks to a month. Now, let's talk about what's been going on here in the States here, and we'll talk about the Democratic presidential run. And Super Tuesday, South Carolina, elections took place, the voting took place. Let's just talk about the candidates we had going into Super Tuesday. Joe was confident. He kept it on these talk shows. How are you going to do, Joe? I mean, if you lose in South Carolina, are you going to cancel your and suspend your campaign? And Joe said adamantly, I'm going to win South Carolina. And well, folks, South Carolina, it came and went. But I want to give and highlight who may have balanced or put his thumb or his the reputation that he brings that helped Joe Biden, and that was Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina, and he held his cards close to his chest regarding on who he was going to recommend to his constituents there in South Carolina his endorsement, and it came down days before that he was putting his hat in Joe Biden's ring. And folks, this whole last 3 to 4 days has been shocking. But Joe Biden came out on this past Friday with a big win in South Carolina. He trumped the field, and he won double digits and further in against his contenders. So big win on Friday, and folks, I believe that this signaled to the voters that were leaning on the fence and just saying, look, from all they were hearing, looking at the polls, that Joe Biden, he was done. He had a TKO knockout. He was on the floor, out cold, and all of a sudden he rose up and beat the field and beat them bad. So they were whispering and calling Joe out on his feet. Well, he won a big win there in South Carolina, and I think it was that substantial a win, and the people coming out voting for Joe Biden. And again, both the black vote and definitely was a force for Joe Biden, and I think that's why we had right after that vote in South Carolina, we had Tom Steyer, Amy Klobuchar, and Pete Buttigieg step down. And I think Pete, when it comes to Pete Buttigieg, he saw basically the handwriting on the wall that, without the black vote in the Democratic Party, if even they're even talking right now, if Trump gets 5% of the black vote nationwide, that's going to topple the Democrats, and 2020 will be President Trump's. And I think Pete Buttigieg knew that, he already, there were issues in his campaign, and when we come to identity politics, the Democrats might have been loved of Mayor Pete, but when it came to the black vote, there were some concerns with Mayor Pete. So what did we have here? That big win propelled Joe Biden, and people looking back now and saying this is historic because we moved into Super Tuesday, or as Joe Biden would say, Super Thursday. I think he lost. Joe has been losing days and not knowing exactly what's going on around him. So when it came to Super Tuesday, he was calling it Super Thursday. But regardless of where Joe was, there was a tremendous momentum that came out of South Carolina, and he had a tremendous night on Super Tuesday, and shocking to the pundits that he did so well. So now we see, was it all along that the polls that had been showing Joe Biden the front runner, had people kind of lost, or had the polls been skewed here over the last month or two because of Joe's showing on the debate stage? I don't know, but I believe, as I stated before, that South Carolina gave permission to those voters that were on the fence to say, okay, he's got the momentum, I'm going to throw down with Joe Biden, Uncle Joe. And Super Tuesday was a tremendous win for Uncle Joe. Now what we saw is, Bernie's not down and out, but I want to just talk about some key factors to keep in mind here. Leading up to South Carolina and Super Tuesday, what do we hear from Bernie Sanders? I mean, he's taught, and I think this came into play also when we start talking about why did Joe do so well. What was Bernie Sanders talking about a lot over the last 2 weeks before these elections? and he had been on TV being interviewed. But when it came to these communist dictators like Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro, Cuba, and how he was, praising them for their forward thinking and things that they enacted. And you just kind of, there were many people were outraged at how Bernie could, uplift these killers and killing of their own people and these dictators and tyrants. But he did, and he didn't apologize, and he didn't run away from them. And I think that was, if we wanted to put any one thing that affected Joe Biden's momentum and going into South Carolina and Super Tuesday, it was that comment coming out of his mouth, of his embrace of these thugs and killers and murderers. So, if anything, Bernie can look in the mirror and say, is this a strategy of, telling the people that I'm a socialist, a far slow socialist / communist sympathizer? Is that going to be the winning message if he were to get the general election? America is not ready for that, and they're not going over that bridge in America, at least not in the year 2020. So, what do we have here? What's taking place right now? Well, after Super Tuesday and Joe's tremendous lead or win, we have Joe Biden right now. He is up by about 88 delegate votes now. So he's shot up. He's ahead of Bernie Sanders. At least he's ahead right now. But what's the game that the Democrat Party boss, I think, are going to be playing here is now they're going to do a slow roll in some of the tally counts, like in Colorado and California. They haven't totally got all the numbers crunched, and I think basically the Democrat Party bosses have put the word out. Let's put the brakes down on our tallying, and let's not get a final result of the Super Tuesday results until after we've got, I believe Florida is coming up, and there's a series of states that it looks like Joe, with all this momentum, is going to win, and so he's going to amass even more. So when Joe Biden does amass even more after some more of these votes, the true number of Super Tuesdays are going to come forth, showing that actually Bernie Sanders probably ended up eking by Uncle Joe, but it's not going to matter because he's already won the other races down the road here in a couple of weeks. So Joe Biden will still have the momentum, so to speak, to the public 2 weeks when the final tally comes out for the Super Tuesday. Now, let's just take a quick snapshot of what's going on here. We saw that right after South Carolina, and as I mentioned, some factors that helped Uncle Joe get over the hump there in Super Tuesday. Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg ended their campaign. Now, these were the so-called moderates for the Democrats. Now, as we talked last week, when moderate is kind of a you can throw that word up in the air and it can have a few different meanings. To a Republican, it can mean and does mean quite a difference from a Democrat that's been voting in these races. These candidates, so-called the moderates, really aren't moderates. They are leftists. So, and they are leaning the socialist way. Klobuchar and Mayor Pete. In fact, most everyone on that stage. Joe Biden, Bernie, obviously socialist / communist. We use that word lightly, moderate. But for a Democrat, Klobuchar and Buttigieg are the examples for a Democrat as a moderate. Having them leave the race and throw their hat for Joe Biden did have an effect, and I believe did help him with that momentum in South Carolina. And Tom Steyer, he's up. Finally, Tom Steyer suspended his campaign the weekend before Super Tuesday. Now, who's left? Well, we have, first of all, after that, who do we have left? We have Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, and obviously Joe Biden. Now, Thursday, an announcement. Folks, what we heard was that Pocahontas packed up her teepee and went home. She, from Massachusetts on Thursday, yesterday, she announced that she is suspending her campaign. So Pocahontas is no longer on the warpath, and we won't see her in on a debate stage anytime soon. And at this point, she is holding back. She needs time to think and evaluate who she's going to endorse. So it'll be interesting, I guess, to hear who she's going to endorse. And at this point, I'm not even sure if Bernie or Uncle Joe wants her endorsement. But that's it. Elizabeth Warren has suspended her campaign. Now Tulsi Gabbard, interesting. She's already been kind of touted as she's nowhere in that field as a Democrat, but she's still left in there. And who is that going to, is that going to be a hurt or a hindrance for Uncle Joe, or will it possibly affect Bernie Sanders? This is going to be interesting. If she lingers in there, I would say the only positive, I guess, for the front runners here, Joe and Bernie, would be that if Tulsi Gabbard does make a debate stage, and now that there's the three of them, most likely that the Democrat Party would allow her to be on a debate stage, if they even have debates after the momentum that Joe has. I'm not sure if he wants to get on a debate stage, but anyway, it's slated that we will see them on debating one another. But having Tulsi in the middle could take the pressure and take the less of the flashlight or spotlight, on Joe Biden and his handling of the toe-to-toe with Bernie Sanders. Because let's face it, folks, Joe Biden has struggled in every single debate, and I can't see him. There's been a couple of good outings, a few, but sustained for 2 hours on a debate stage, and Bernie's gonna be going after him, because now everyone's looking at Joe Biden as the front runner. Will he be able to hold up? And that has been the talk. Has Joe lost his fastball? And would he be able to hold his own when it comes to these debates? And when these Democrats that are going to be going to the polls, that's what they're now going to be. They have the attention in the Democrat Party. Those voters are now, I believe, in tune on this race, and poor showings in debate could turn this slide that Bernie has been facing here and give him some momentum. So we'll see how this plays out, folks. But right as it is right now, I believe that the Democrat Party and the party bosses have put their thumb on the scale, and they're all out for Bernie Sanders, because they do not want this far leftist, socialist, communist at the top of their ticket and up against President Donald Trump. So, folks, I want to just go back to, there's been a lot in the news and social media, again, regarding this strain of influenza, this coronavirus. And I would just ask that we should keep our eyes, keep our prayers, especially for the professionals, the medical professionals that are out there, the scientists that are out there to come up with a remedy or a inoculation for the population. And now we're talking about the world. A lot of countries right now are being drastically affected. And let's not overlook the U.S. economy is strong. We're going to get through this, but the stock market has taken a direct hit. Not anything President Trump could do. He didn't know that this coronavirus and this illness was going to affect many countries around the world. Our economy is still strong, and when we get, as these professionals come up with an inoculation, shots to inoculate the population, we're going to see the stock market. I believe the U.S. Stocks are going to, and our economy is going to shoot up like a rocket, because ultimately our economy is strong. In fact, even right now they were talking about unemployment numbers are at again another record low. But let's keep our professionals in prayer. Keep our president and Congress that they do the right thing when it comes to coronavirus. And I just want to take a step back too, and I want to bring out something too, that being prayerful. We had an incident that highlights the fact that the enemy wants to kill innocents. And we saw that on the steps of the Supreme Court. And we had Chuck Schumer out there, despicable. And it doesn't surprise me with what's been going on. The Kavanaugh hearings for when he was testifying for his coming on to the Supreme Court, and what they did to him, and that the hatred for life that we were seeing coming from the pro-death crowd. And Chuck Schumer was up there with this group of that were protesting, because right now the Supreme Court is hearing a court situation on pro-life, dealing with pro-life, and Chuck Schumer was leading this group, and he threatening. And this is what he said: "I tell Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price." And folks, right to it, basically threatening these justices. And there has been an outcry, and Thursday, Chuck Schumer apologized for saying those things, and he was Mitch McConnell came out and condemned it, and we heard many in the House that condemned those sayings, what he was saying. But the enemy is out. They want and that is, if you want to talk about a contrast, we have the Democrat Party, the majority in the Democrat Party that are pro-death, and these initiatives coming through that, babies now born aren't safe, and they're talking about, and we've seen laws being passed that babies born alive now are murdered by these new laws that are coming out that the Democrats have been pushing. So we want to pray that for decisions from our Supreme Court, President Trump also too. And I want to kind of finish right now, folks, and I want to highlight, we get to talking about politics and, being against some of the things that the Democrats are, that, they're pushing. So politically, I'm not, I'm not those liberal, far leftist things when it comes to, in many areas that the Democrats are pushing, are not going to strengthen this nation. But when you see something that you look at, because we get so sometimes, and when it comes to politics, we lose sight that, hey, the Democrats, are people too, and they have hurts, and they need the Lord, just like we all do. I mean, there come a day that every knee shall bow, every tongue will confess. So, but God wants to bring everyone. He doesn't want anyone to perish, but all to come to repentance. And we need to, as we were talking about praying for our leaders, pray for those that have those views that would of death, that God would come in and there would be a stir in their heart, a time to come to repentance and realize that this is pro-death is not will not lift. Is not uplifting, but it's tearing down humanity, and it's a sin against our Lord. So that revelation would come forth, and that they would see the truth. I want to just leave with you one thing that impressed me over after Super Tuesday, and it was, I want to give some kudos to Jill Biden, Uncle Joe's wife, and he was on stage just accepting that big win, and he was talking to the crowd that was assembled there on Super Tuesday, and these crazy activists, I guess something to do with animal rights, but they stormed the stage. They grabbed one and was able to escort one, but this young woman, 20-something, 23, 24, got up and was heading towards Joe Biden. And Jill Biden stood up and was right there, in defense of Joe. He was out over the stage, and she saw this crazed young woman coming his way, and she stood strong to blunt this girl from getting any closer to her husband. And also there was a larger woman that had come. She saw what was going on. She was part of the Biden campaign, and she came right up there and grabbed this woman and lifted her right up and carried her right off the stage. But I want to give kudos to that woman that came on stage, and to Jill Biden to step forth for her husband in a defensive mode for her hubby. And it was I just want to give Jill Biden some kudos for that. And folks, that's my perspective and comments.